Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Arabiya English. I'm Tom Burgess-Watson. Coming up on today's programme, we'll have all the latest on the humanitarian situation in Gaza with a recently returned doctor, the self-styled beast from the Middle East. He'll be telling us about the reality of the situation there. Plus, we'll get the latest on Syria's reconstruction and how the country's economy is projected to return to growth. And we'll have all the latest political developments in the United States. That's in our weekly US check-in. Hello and welcome to the programme. We begin with the situation in Gaza, where at least 52 people, including 8 children, are reported to have been killed by Israeli forces. Well, Gaza's civil defence agency says the latest wave of deadly strikes began at dawn this morning. Well, this came just hours after Hamas announced its willingness to release 10 hostages as part of indirect ceasefire talks with Israel in Qatar. Well, for more than 21 months now, Gaza has been under intense bombardment. More than 57,000 people are reported to have been killed. Well, Majdoulin Jadallah, a Gaza resident, lost her nieces and nephews earlier on this morning. Let's take a listen.
What did these kids do to deserve this? The kids in Gaza are hungry, no food, no water. There is nothing for them. So they should at least be allowed to play, but instead they ended up being victims. What did they do to deserve this? And now their mother has to pay the price too. She lost her children whom she raised so well. These are innocent children. Where is the world to stand by this? Isn't this shameful?
Well, let's get more on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. We can speak now to the British-Australian doctor, Mohammed Mustafa, who is an emergency physician, known online to his fans and supporters as the Beast from the Middle East. That's his handle on social media. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us, Dr. Mustafa. Really appreciate it. Just first of all, could you just tell us when were you last in Gaza and how many times you've been there so far in your capacity as a doctor?
So I've been there twice as a doctor. I was there in 2024 and I was there again this year. And I left mid-April. I left this year.
All right, so you've been there really recently. I mean, people will be wondering what motivated you? What were your motivations to go there and help out?
Well, you know, I think what we're seeing with regards to the destruction and systematic dismantling of the healthcare system in Gaza, I felt as a healthcare professional and as a doctor that it was my duty to go over there and help my fellow colleagues in, this catastrophe that is Gaza right now.
How long did you stay and how did you get in and out of Gaza?
So I was there for about 5 weeks this time. We go in through the UN convoy that goes in, and you have to go in through the Jordanian crossing, through to the Alimbi crossing, through the West Bank, through Israel, and then enter through Karam Shalom crossing. So that's how most of the UN convoys go in and out of Gaza since the closure of the Rafah border.
You've described it in other media as a life-changing experience. How did it change you, Dr. Mustafa?
You know, that first night when the ceasefire broke, over 200 children were killed in an hour and a half. When you see that many children's bodies disintegrated, organs, pieces of limbs, pieces of hair, it changes your perspective on a lot of things in life. It makes all those things that you thought were an inconvenience in life seem so trivial. When you see how cheap the blood of these people in Gaza are, that hundreds of them are slaughtered every single day while we were in Gaza. It really changes your perspective and outlook on life.
Sure, I can't even begin to imagine what you've seen. I don't think anyone can compare that to anything they've experienced in their own lives, apart from people probably in Gaza. What were your first impressions when you got there? I mean, you've been brought up in the UK and in Australia, I'm told. Do correct me if I'm wrong. What were your first impressions when you got to a hospital in the middle of a war zone? Let's say on this latest visit, what struck you first?
Do you know, we didn't even have a ventilator in the emergency department. There was essentially no analgesia as well, which is painkillers. And these are very basic necessities. There wasn't even a thermometer as well in the department. So, you know, children were coming in with skin infections because of living out in tents and the lack of hygiene equipment and the lack of hygiene products. And we couldn't even measure whether they had a temperature or not. We couldn't check people's sugar levels because we didn't have glucose sticks. When people would come in and they would have heart attacks or they would have explosive injuries, we couldn't even put them in a medically induced coma with a ventilator. You know, we were asking families to bag and mask their relatives to blow air into their lungs via a balloon because we just didn't have ventilators. We had only a limited number of oxygen cylinders, and those oxygen cylinders would run out. And, you know, when the Baptist hospital was bombed a couple of days after I left, when they tried to get out one of those patients that was in a medically induced coma, the oxygen cylinder ran out as they evacuated him, and that child, who was a child, died on the streets of Gaza because there was no oxygen.
So obviously the hospitals are in a terrible condition. Hardly got any of the resources you would expect a hospital to have by the sounds of things. I mean, what was your day-to-day role? What did your day look like when you were there?
Well, I'm an emergency physician, so I'm in the emergency department, and because there's essentially no primary healthcare left in Gaza, my role was to support and see whatever came through that front door, whether that was somebody who had a sprained ankle, whether that was someone who had a cough, whether that was someone who had their limbs missing, whether that was someone who had their jaw blown off, whether that was someone that was riddled in bullets. My job was the front line. I was there to pretty much pick up any pieces or any situation I had to deal with.
And during your downtime, I mean, I don't imagine you had a lot of downtime. Sounds like you were working around the clock. But what were your sort of coping mechanisms to try to process what you'd seen every day and try to relax or sleep at least?
You know, the doctors in Gaza and the healthcare workers, they're suffering from compassion fatigue. They're exhausted of dealing with these mass casualty events day in, day out. That, you know, it's almost a struggle for them when they see more death, for them to rush. You know, we're rushing the international doctors to see all of these injured people. The Gaza doctors are rushing as well, but they are much slower paced because they are exhausted and they're fatigued. And I think what motivated me when I was there and what kind of got to me was I need to help the healthcare workers as much as I need to help these patients. These doctors some of them have been injured. Some of them have been tortured. And, you know, been taken into captivity for months before being released. And some of them have lost family members. And they're still turning up to work every day, working 24-hour shifts. So for me, in my head, there was just no excuse. I just had to be there every day for them. There was no days off for me. It was always, what can I do to help?
And obviously you were seeing horrific injuries. You've been saying this, you've been telling us, Dr. Mustafa, about the sort of stuff you saw every day. I mean, horrific scenes. I mean, I'm assuming you haven't seen anything like that anywhere else in the world, and that no emergency room in the world could have prepared you for what you had to see there in Gaza.
I think even if we had the most fully functioning, fully equipped, fully staffed hospital in the UK or in Australia, it wouldn't deal with the mass casualty events that we were seeing in Gaza. But we were dealing with these mass casualty events without a thermometer, without painkillers, without proper dressings or bandages. You know, it was difficult as an emergency doctor. It was difficult because people were dying and they didn't need to die. If we had the right equipment, if we had more staff, we could have saved more lives. And I think that's always been the point that's always resonated and hit home to me, is that this is a man-made disaster. The bombs are being dropped by men, and the siege that blocks this medical equipment is man-made as well. So, you know, this is what's motivated me, that if it's a man-made problem, it can be a man-made solution. And that's what we're trying to do.
I mean, I'm assuming you're still in touch with a lot of the doctors that you were working with over there. I mean, we're being told that fuel supplies are dwindling. Access to clean water is becoming more of an issue. Now there's a heat wave that's set in as well. I mean, are they telling you that the situation is getting even worse than it was when you were there? And I mean, and clearly it was hellish even then.
I mean, you know, we were there when the hospitals were being bombed, when I was in it. We were there when the paramedics were executed and buried while I was there. And, to think that the situation is worse than healthcare workers being executed and buried in shallow graves and hospitals being bombed, and the situation now is even worse, it kind of hits home to you how bad the situation is. We've had now multiple directors of hospitals that have been killed in the last few days, along with their families. We've had entire hospitals destroyed, like the Indonesian hospital, the Turkish cancer hospital, all have been destroyed. And, this is creating more and more, especially with the siege, it's creating more and more of a disaster in Gaza, a human catastrophe.
I mean, we're far away from those events, and covering the situation's particularly hard for us as journalists because we're not allowed into Gaza. So we have to rely on testimony from people like you and information that comes to us from the Israeli government. And the Israeli government tells us quite different things from what you're saying. For example, what you're saying is that most of the people you were seeing day to day, I don't know if it's just the hospital you're working in or whether this is actually the case, but you're making it sound like most of the people you're seeing were children or people who had absolutely nothing to do with didn't pose any kind of a threat to the state of Israel. Is that what you're saying essentially?
So, we were seeing children with single gunshot wounds to the head and neck, sniper wounds to the head and neck. These are targeted shots of children. We were seeing that during the ceasefire. We were seeing people who had been who had been blown up, waiting in line at a bakery for food. Right now, what we're seeing in Gaza right now is we're seeing people being gunned down as they're being funneled into cages to get food and water. And Israeli soldiers have admitted on Israeli media that they were given orders to shoot at civilians. So it's not me saying this, it's IDF soldiers are corroborating what I'm saying, which is they are shooting civilians at will.
I mean, you are a doctor, and we've spoken to a couple of doctors who've been to Gaza, and it's amazing the difference between what doctors like you tell us and what we hear from Israeli officials. And doctors are obviously very credible witnesses because we trust our doctors on the whole. Does it feel like you've got a huge responsibility now, Dr. Mustafa, to let people know the reality of what's happening there in Gaza? Do you feel that's your role now?
Well, I think so. I think, when the only Western people allowed into Gaza that are not, taken around by the IDF, but actually people there on the ground, in and amongst the civilian population and in hospitals, it is incumbent on us as medical professionals, by our oath, to speak out against crimes of humanity that are going on, and to also support our colleagues in Gaza, the healthcare workers who have been systematically targeted and killed in this conflict. So, it's not just something that I want to do. It's something that we have to do. It's something that we are obliged to do as doctors. In order for us to alleviate the suffering of those patients in Gaza, we have to advocate for them. I have to advocate for my patients. And this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to advocate for my patients so we can get them the necessary medical help that they deserve.
I mean, I'm assuming you watch the news on a regular basis and you keep up to date with what's happening in the situation, particularly the diplomatic efforts that don't seem to be delivering any results for now. What would you say are the biggest differences between what you know to be the reality from having seen it yourself and what you see on your TV screen on an average British, American, Australian TV channel?
Well, I think, there's no denying what's happening in Gaza. We're seeing the videos of people being gunned down. We're seeing videos of children with horrific injuries and missing limbs and missing heads. I think the thing that really is frightening to see is the justification for these images that we're seeing. It's not just the justification that we're seeing, but sometimes it's even the denial at the scale at which it's happening. We have got tens of thousands of dead women and children. There are estimates in the Lancet report and respected medical journals that it could be in the hundreds of thousands dead. To have people on media arguing over, chants at Glastonbury, whether that's okay or not, but whether the actual killing of 600 people is okay or not, that doesn't even receive the same media coverage. That Glastonbury period of 3 days, 600 Palestinians were killed in Gaza. Where's the outrage for those 600 people? Why is the outrage for a punk rock band and their chant? And this is, I think, the problem in the media is the real issues are not being discussed. The truth is out there, and I think everybody knows how horrific the scenes are in Gaza, but it's the constant steering of the narrative by the media, which is the problem. And that's what I try and do. I try and steer back the narrative back to the situation on the ground in Gaza, which is all of these things that are happening all around the world, and the, rise in Islamophobia and the rise of anti-Semitism. These things can all be attributed back to this conflict, this war, and we need to focus on that, because if we solve that, it will bring the temperature down all over the world, and it will bring the temperature down on Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, which is something that we all want to see.
Are you noticing a shift in the narrative in terms of how the media, well, you're in the UK, so probably you're best placed to judge when it comes to British media, but are you noticing it shift? In particular, very hard to maintain the narrative that Israeli officials give us, which is that everyone's got plenty to eat and no one's dying of starvation. When you see the pictures of emaciated children, it's very difficult to buy that narrative. Are you seeing the narrative shift?
Yeah. Well, I think the mask is off. I think, since there's been a change in the American government, which has been more open about its plans for Gaza and the Riviera of Gaza, and the more openness of the Israeli government and Israeli government ministers, like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, to come on and say that they want to ethnically cleanse Gaza and that there's no innocence in Gaza, and they want to put people now in a concentration camp. And I think, because they've got more brazen with the statements that they're making, public opinion has completely shifted, and that public opinion is putting pressure on governments to change their stances. And we're seeing a lot more pressure on governments, and we're seeing a lot more change in the tone of governments. But the key word is tone, not action. The tone has changed, but now we need actions to go with that tone change, because there hasn't been a change of actions. There's still the supply of weapons and arms, and there's still the diplomatic cover. And, words and rhetoric only get you so far. What we need is action. We need to stop the killing of these innocent women and children.
Do words like genocide and war crimes sound like appropriate words to be using in the context of what you saw, Dr. Mustafa?
I even think we're past the stage of war crimes and genocide. We're looking at a new age Holocaust here. We're talking about completely wiping out an entire population, moving them into concentration camps, and starving 1 million children. No education for those kids, no vaccines, the blockading of baby formula, children, the largest cohort of children amputees in the world, largest cohort per population size of orphans. There is no words to describe left what's happened in Gaza. Churches have been bombed, mosques have been bombed, hospitals have been bombed, schools have been bombed. The embryo clinic was bombed, and 4,000 embryos were destroyed. Sorry. There's nothing left, of what we can call a, targeted self-defense here. This is a complete obliteration of a people and a complete dismantling of a people, and it's gone beyond genocide now. This is final. We're talking final solution type images that we're seeing in Gaza, where we're seeing emaciated children in cages being shot down. That's what we're seeing right now. So I think, for me, I don't really like to discuss the terms genocide, Holocaust, war crimes. For me, it's irrelevant what you want to call it. The issue is that people are dying, and that's what we need to focus on. We need to focus on stopping the killing. And the words are just noise. Whether someone wants to call it a genocide or a Holocaust, it doesn't matter to me what you want to call it. But what we need to call it is we need to call it unjust and unfair and wrong. It's wrong. Whether you want to call it a genocide or not, it doesn't matter. It is wrong what is happening in Gaza. Killing women and children and starving 1 million children is wrong. And that's all that matters, really, is we just need everybody to be on the same page, to know that what's happening is wrong.
Does it feel to you like it's been risky speaking up about this? I mean, while you were in Gaza, presumably you feared for your life on more than one occasion, I'm sure. I mean, by the sounds of things, you were in a very dangerous situation. But even since you left, do you feel like, has anyone threatened you? Has anyone told you it would be advisable not to speak out on these issues?
There's been a few. There's been a few incidences. But, you know, look, I think if you are scared to speak out, I totally understand. But children are dying, and somebody needs to stand up for them, and somebody needs to champion their cause. And however scary it might become for me, it's not more scary than what's happening to those children. I am not more scared than a child in Gaza who's lost their entire family, and drones are overhead and bombs are raining down on their tents. No matter what happens to me, I'm in a much better position than those people in Gaza. And therefore, I have to stand up for those people in Gaza. I have to be there as their voice, because they don't have a voice right now. So, you know, yes, there is a lot of fear speaking up and speaking out, but I'm not doing anything heroic here. I'm just speaking truth to power, and I'm speaking for people that don't have a voice. That's all I'm trying to do.
And you're being heard, because I gather you met the Irish president recently. Yes. You're visible, you're audible. What sort of a welcome did you get from the Irish president? What sort of a welcome have you had from other world leaders? And what's your appeal to world leaders?
You know, it was an amazing experience meeting the Irish president, Michael Higgins. He's such a wonderful gentleman and full of knowledge. And, you know, we spoke at length over the situation. He spoke at length over the history of the conflict and the history of the various fractions. And he was very well knowledgeable and well versed in what was going on over there. And, you know, my reception has been from world leaders is that I sense that they know how horrific the situation is on the ground. I don't think anybody behind closed doors is denying what is happening on the ground in Gaza. I think there is a lot of closed door solidarity, but that's not translating into policy. I think, you know, the appeal that I have maybe for these politicians is, you know, I'm pragmatic about the solutions. I'm pragmatic about what's happening. I'm honest. And, you know, I want to be solution-based rather than victim-blaming, rather than playing a victim, rather than any of these things. I want to be solution-orientated. And I think a lot of the time politicians get people coming in to their doors complaining about what's going on, which is the correct thing to do. But coming in with grievances but no actions. And I've got actions and I've got solutions that I want governments to listen to.
Just lastly, I mean, Tom, we're nearly out of time. I mean, I was amazed to read that you say you miss Gaza. I'm wondering if you're planning to go back. I just also wanted to ask you just very briefly how you think history is going to look back on this particular chapter.
Well, I think history's already talking to us now. I think we already are at that stage where history is already being written here. You know, the cases at the ICJ, the arrest warrants at the ICC, the human rights organizations who have all called it a genocide, the UN calling it a genocide. You know, world leaders from around the world, the whole global south, the uprising of these laws to stifle free speech and protests all around the world. I mean, we're already at a precipice where history has been made here. And those that are involved have already been judged. And I think, you know, it's incumbent on all of us right now to be on the right side of history. And the right side of history is to stop the killing of women and children. It's not a controversial statement to say. It's not controversial to say, I believe that women and children shouldn't be killed. But that's where we're at right now. So I think that's the way history's going to judge. History's going to judge us on what we did in this moment and how we fought back against this catastrophic, disastrous conflict in Gaza.
Would you go back?
I'd love to go back. I'm in the process of applying to go back. I know the difference that can be made when you're over there. I know that sometimes even if you don't have medical equipment, just being a shoulder, an arm, a hug, and some words and a bit of energy can make such a difference into an emergency department.
Okay, you've given us a lot of your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. British Australian Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, thank you very much indeed, and wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
Now we're going to turn our eye to an economic news story now, and specifically the situation in Syria. That's a country that has undergone a major political shift ever since the ouster of President Bashar al-Assad, which happened in December of last year. Well, after 13 years of conflict, Syria may now be on the road to economic reform to rebuild and recover. Well, the World Bank expects Syria's GDP to grow 1% in 2025. Meanwhile, Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, announced in April that they will settle the country's debt to the World Bank, which total around $15 million. Well, for more on this, we're joined here in the studio by Dr. Osama Kadi, who's a senior advisor to the Minister of Economy and Industry in Syria. Thank you very much indeed for coming to see us, Dr. Kadi. You're from Aleppo. You worked as an economics consultant in Syria, in Canada, the United States. At one stage, it looked like you were going to be involved in Syria's governance. You're now going to be, obviously, in that role that I just mentioned, sort of behind the scenes. You published, whilst you were engaged with the opposition, a paper entitled The Economic Map of the New Syria. It was a plan for the post-war economic recovery. That day has now come. Just tell us how involved you are in Syria's future.
Actually, from day first of the revolution, I joined the opposition and joined Syrian people, basically. We established what we call Syrian people friend for economic development and reconstruction in 2012, headed by Germany and United Arab Emirates. We had the first meeting in May 2012 in Abu Dhabi. I believe 45 countries attended, and then we had another one in October 2012 titled the investment in New Syria. 200 business people attended, most of them Syrians, and they pledged at that time to invest $5 billion the minute that toppled down the Syrian regime. And then we have in Berlin, Germany, another conference. And then we had in South Korea the last conference in 2013. So what we had with the Syrian Economic Task Force, the Syrian economic roadmap in 14 sectors, what we should do the first 6 months, the first 2 years, the first 5 years. And that was in 2012, so advanced, like 13 years before we're done with that Syrian regime. So right now we're trying to do, things are, so different than 2013, 2014 for sure, because Bashar Assad destroyed the whole country, 13 million people, refugee and displaced, so it will be different calculations, I guess.
Okay, so the plan is there. Are the right people in the right jobs to steer Syria's economy, do you think?
Most of the time, yes, because we have very good technocrat governments. We had people graduated from the United States, from UK, from France, from Germany. All those are ministers right now. So they are really doing a great job in networking with the international community. I just want to remind you, since 1979, Hafiz al-Assad, the dad of Bashar, he actually let us listed as a country that support terrorists since 1979. So we are isolated from the whole globe since then. So now, just imagine, after 50, 60 years, right now you're going to be a normal member of the global community, international community, and even the SWIFT and correspondent banks just worked 10 days ago. So you're able to establish account in Syria with any bank and transfer like $100 or $100 million That happened just 10 days ago. We are done with this isolation and with that, all sanctions. That's really, really very advanced success.
Right, I mean, things are really changing fast, aren't they? When you consider the World Bank says that Syria's GDP is going to grow 1% in 2025. I mean, that is a remarkable turnaround from a contraction last year, and given the fact that the country has been totally cut off from the rest of the world economy.
I might even disagree with the World Bank. This estimate of 1% is, I don't think it's accurate and can't be accurate, because if we were -4%, if right now we are at 1%, then we improve 5% economic growth, not 1%. And even the ministers right now, they don't have the data to show how much we grow so far. So I think that was just an estimate, and at very early stage. Usually you have to have the first quarter economic growth, second quarter economic growth. We're done with Syrian regime 6 months ago. So that's just an estimate, and I believe we won't really know the economic growth accurately till the end of the year, and that's what we're working on.
Would you agree with the plus sign in front of the number?
Plus for sure, but not
Okay.
not one for sure. I'm sure more than 1%.
Okay, well, so it's heading in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Tell us, you were last in Syria a couple of days ago, I gather.
Mm-hmm.
What is the country like now? I mean, what's the mood there? What's life like for ordinary Syrians?
For ordinary Syrians, they were, especially employees in the public sector, so happy because they will increase their salaries 200%. So I met, for example, the driver of the mayor of Aleppo, who drove me to Damascus. He said, my salary right now, 320,000 Syrian pounds, which is like $32. And right now it will be 800,000. I'm the happiest person on earth. Since I work here since 27 years, never had this raise in my life. Besides, they had a gift at Eid time, like a couple of weeks ago, of 500,000 Syrian pound. This is as a gift for all employees. So they are happy in this turn. It's a lot of investors are interested in investing in Syria in a way that I couldn't believe that the amount of people who are really interested, just one number, like 6,200 new projects, new companies registered in Syria since 6 months.
Sure.
So 2,000 already executed their projects, and the rest are in their way. So, and a lot of international companies, you know that, like CMA, they got the Latakia port, DP from Dubai, the Tartus port. We have $7 billion energy contract with the 4 countries, including United States. We had $1.5 billion just entertainment and for arts and cinema and like studios. It's a huge for Syria. $1 billion for studios is just beyond belief. If in 2024, our general budget, $2 billion for the whole Syria. So the guy is coming, the investor, to invest 1.5 billion only in studios. Besides, for tourism, just signed MOU for $8 billion in tourism. And a lot of companies, we can't keep a track with those.
Okay, I mean, we'll talk a bit more about investment in just a moment, but just going back to life for ordinary Syrians, I mean, I'm assuming a large section of the population is still living in poverty-like conditions, aren't they?
With this increase of minimum wage, our recommendation was don't just raise the income, because that will go only for public sector. But how about the private sector, which is 2/3 of the labor force? So the recommendation was to raise the whole minimum wage. So used to be 200,000 minimum wage, which is like $20. Right now they increase it to 750,000. And that like a huge increase for anyone in Syria for the average. For the electricity is getting better, but I saw many cities like Hama, for example, the solar system in all Hama. So everybody's relying on the sunshine, not really relying on the...
Individually, or is that provided
individually,
by... Okay.
Like privately. So people get used to this because if I can remind everybody, 6 months ago, we were 3 areas of influence, Russian one, American one, Turkish one, and we used to have 540 military base 6 months ago. So imagine this shift from having all those huge international military and militias from Iraq and sects of militias. Right now, you are like in very much like, relatively speaking, safe areas. Some small areas they are still dealing with, but the rest is very safe. Like I used to, come back to hotel at 2 a.m. every day. Everybody's in the street. Everybody's like having fun in cafes. Sometimes you can't find even place in the cafes at 1 a.m.
Okay, I was going to ask you actually, because I mean, one of the sectors that Syria used to thrive in was, of course, tourism, and tourists used to visit Syria, including me, in large numbers. And yet we've had, there is still some evidence that things are not quite stable. A Shia cleric was assassinated, I believe, yesterday, yes, I think it was yesterday, in Homs. There was that attack on the Orthodox Church in Damascus, a deadly attack in June. Then there were the attacks on the Alawites in the coastal areas. Is it safe for tourists to come back to Syria, or are we not quite there yet?
I think for tourists, many cities are very safe, like Damascus, Aleppo, Homs, Hama, anywhere. There's some cities, many cities in like small cities in Latakia or Jabla might not be very safe. In Damascus, that incident when happened, within less than 24 hours, the whole gangs get captured immediately. And so they know them, and right now they are like really putting all their efforts to make it safer and safer. Remember, even in UK, for 20 years, the Sinn Féin, every 1 week they have bombs somewhere in London. And still UK is UK. I told you 6 months ago, we used to have 540 militia base and military base. So it's not easy to have 100% like safe and everywhere. But I can assure you that if you wanna right now try to have a ticket to Syria, you're not gonna find from now to 2 months. Okay. Just to have one ticket. Like, there's no place, no seats. All of them filled. Most of them Syrians. Some of them are companies who are interested in Syria from everywhere, from UK, from United States, from China, from South Korea. You're going to find there a lot of those everywhere from all over the world. But I want to just shed lights that on even the number of tourists in 2010 were only 8 million people as tourists, where like Cyprus has 4 million. So we're not really doing that much even in tourism. That's even before the revolution. We are aiming to have at least till 2035, at least 30 to 40 million tourists in Syria, inshallah.
Okay, well, so clearly lots is going to happen on that front. The US president has dismantled sanctions against Syria. That's something that the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Assad Hassan al-Shaibani, has welcomed, saying it's going to open the door for reconstruction and development. What difference is that making so far? Are we seeing evidence that's making a difference already?
I just spoke to 3 banks that they have transfer inflow, outflow, and they say like we are back to life again after all these years, decades. So right now, without removing that sanctions, we won't be able to have a life in our SWIFT. No correspondent banks will work with us, and we'll be isolated forever. So right now, just a couple weeks ago, or maybe less than 10 business days, now we are back live. I want to shed light on one small thing too. 4 days ago, the Turkish coordinators who used to manage the Turkish area of influence gave all the data to Aleppo mayor and his staff just 4 days ago. We were in very, very complicated phase before. 6 months ago. It's not 6 years ago. No. So it's a really, really big shift. So yes, they are cooperating, but they want to feel that the mayor, the city is ready to have everything in their hands. So just 4 days ago.
You mentioned that 6-month time frame. Just really for the benefit of our viewers, because we broke the news in this studio of Bashar al-Assad being ousted, which felt surreal. He's been around for years. His father was around from long before we were born. Well, certainly in my case. A new leader is installed. He's been brought in from the cold. He was there in Riyadh, flanked by President Trump and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on the other side. We heard President Trump describing him as tough and attractive. I mean, very flattering terminology. What does it feel like to you as a Syrian when you look back on these 6 months? I mean, doesn't it all feel quite surreal?
Actually, it's a dream. I will tell you, I was crying when they removed the sanctions, when Mohammed bin Salman make like this and this gesture and stand up and stood up and clap, and the whole Saudis attendance step. It was one of its kind of historical incident for all Syrians. It's like the same weight of the victory date, because we are back from the coma, economic coma after 50 years. Hafiz Assad and Bashar Assad, they put us in very isolated place, so they will do whatever they want to do with this population for 5 decades. So I think it's really a huge move within 6 months, a huge move. Sudan, by the way, took a year and a half with big government in Sudan before the last coup to remove some of the sanctions. Within 6 months, you remove the sanctions and the SWIFT is working. And we have a lot of companies, including American companies, Qatari companies, French companies, United Arab Emirates. And by the way, the president was 2 days ago in United Arab Emirates, the Syrian president. That means the great relationship between Syria and its neighbors. That never happened, by the way. Bashar al-Assad used to swear at all those Arab leaders. They say, like, there's a half-men. They are not really, those are like Bedouins. We don't deal with it. He used to speak trash on the Arab leaders, where now we are welcoming our Arab neighbors. So he was trying always to make some fight with the Arab neighbors to favor whom? The Iranians.
Going back to Saudi Arabia and its contribution, the foreign minister, His Highness Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, went to Damascus in May, I believe it was, with an economic delegation. How important has Saudi's sponsorship, Saudi's support for Syria been these last few months?
It's a huge, and we are expecting to have a big team of business people, and we're not talking tens. We might talk like three figures of businessmen, of Saudi businessmen, to come to Syria to invest in all sectors, and that will surprise not Syrians, will surprise the world of the amount of money they will invest in Syria, and I will leave it to people to see that surprise when they come to Syria, because the reason actually they were late because of less conflict, in flying between Iran and Israel or whatever. Say were not able to fly in. So, but right now they are preparing very, very well to come to Syria and invest in all sectors. And
which sectors are you most excited about?
To be honest, every sectors, like agriculture, industry, tourism, medical. I met with a businessman who will invest in a medical city for $1 billion. And he has the plans. Even before that investment law 114 that announced yesterday, he said, I'm ready. And people are ready in a way that surprised me. I said, like, within 6 months, I expect, once a week you have somebody who's interested, but not on a daily basis. That's a surprise.
Yeah, and that surprised you, and you're surprised, as you mentioned, by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman when he made that gesture at that conference in Riyadh. We heard as well, of course, Saudi Arabia paying off $15 million of Syria's debt to the World Bank. I mean, put that into perspective for us. What message did that send out to the rest of the world?
Very political, correct political message they sent. That those our brothers, we not gonna leave them any time in the hole for forever, and we will support their economy. We will support any step toward making this place economically booming in Syria.
Okay, so clearly lots lots has happened. Bashar al-Assad is out. Hezbollah has been weakened. Iran is distracted. I mean, that means a lot less interference, doesn't it, in Syria's affairs. Does that leave the government then a clear path to do all the things that need to be done? Are you optimistic?
Very optimistic, very, very optimistic. I mean, the whole project of Iranian project to have be like in Yemen and Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, the whole project was a failed project. Their goals never achieved. In Lebanon, they lost. In Syria, they lost. Right now, in Iraq, they will be losing. In Yemen, I think they gave up on this. In Iran itself, been attacked. How come you're going to have nuclear weapon while you don't have even plane or anything, even like air defense? You don't have 300 airplane are just bombing Tehran, and you're watching, and you need to have nuclear weapon. It's just I don't know how the way they think. But besides this, for us, we feel much safer. We know it's challenging. Right now, there's more than 100,000 new soldiers being well trained. Most of them, I'll say more than 20%, they were really experienced fighter over 14 years. The rest are very well trained. Right now, we are ready to challenge anybody will work on unstable this country, and we are really put our hands together to make it very safe, because we need to focus on our economic development.
Okay, we've heard the US Special Envoy for Syria, Tom Barrack, talking about a new Middle East. I mean, what do you think a stable Syria means for the region?
Without stable country like Syria, if there's no stability in Syria, I don't think will be any stability in all region. And you see, what happened in Lebanon, in Iraq, and all over the world. Even like Turkey, when we have some militias trying to attack Turkey from there, and we have Hezbollah's talking unstable the whole country. He want to fight whenever he want to fight, ignoring the government itself, that he will take the decision of war whatever he wants. So this is instability in this region is no longer accepted, and I think everybody is betting on very stable economy, very stable country in Syria, and it will be really part of the 2030 vision of Saudis, where we have really new Middle East, and we will be one of the within 5 to 10 years, the top economic development growth in the whole region. Rwanda, with all massacres happened, they used to have 7% economic growth, then 9%, then 13%. We're the fastest growing economy in Africa. And I don't think we are far away from 10% economic growth very soon.
Okay, and just lastly, sanctions against Bashar al-Assad are still in place. He's, we think, in Russia. What do you think is going to happen to him? Do you think he'll disappear into obscurity, or do you think he'll come back to Syria and face justice?
I think Russia will have some deals to sell the guy. So I think he's so scared right now, because they put him on table to see who will pay the price of this guy. The wealth is in Russia anyway, between Belarus and Russia. So they don't really mind the wealth, because the wealth is there in Russia. For him, they might make a deal with Americans or with Syrians very soon, where we will have great relationship, and here's the guy who killed all your people, so I will give it to you. You never know what will happen very soon.
All right, Dr. Osama Kadi, thank you very much indeed for coming to see us here at Al Arabiya English.
Thank you so much.
Now it's time, as we do every week on a Thursday, to take a look at what's been happening in the United States during the course of the last few days. Well, joining me today is Angie Wong, Republican Party committee member, who joins us now from Florida. Angie, great to have you with us. Really appreciate it. The first thing we're going to be talking about is the fact that the US President Donald Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met twice in Washington this week in a space of just 24 hours, pushing for a ceasefire deal in Gaza. Well, what came out of that? Well, no deal yet, but Netanyahu is saying he will nominate President Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize. Angie, I mean, clearly the source of a lot of frustration for President Trump, trying to get a deal done. I mean, what do you think has been achieved?
Well, hi, Tom. Yes, this is the third time the two presidents and leaders are meeting, and this is looking to be pretty fruitful. Look, the fact that Bibi Netanyahu is offering a Nobel Peace Prize letter to President Trump, I think world leaders have now learned to flatter President Trump as soon as they get to the White House or get to meet with President Trump. It seems like a lot of world leaders like to do that first, because they know that that's what he wants to hear before any negotiations. The ceasefire right now, from what I'm understanding from my sources, is that they're waiting on Hamas to respond. They want to do a prisoner exchange. They want to do hostage release, live hostages released, as well as, and President Trump is trying to push for more humanitarian aid to go into Gaza. He is seeing the images. He does not like to see starvation and famine. That's what's being reported back to the White House. He is asking for a U.S.-led humanitarian aid, squeezing out the UN from the process. And that has frustrated many, many people at the UN. At the same time, at the UN, Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, has gone after one of the representatives there for human rights at the UN, Albanese, and accusing her of interfering in a lot of these talks, especially trying to bring US and Israeli leaders to the ICC. So there's a lot of moving parts here, but it seems like Bibi Netanyahu is meeting with Congress as well, and that seems to be going very, very well. He seems to be asking for more money, for more weaponry, and just more support overall. But this signifies that the U.S. does stand with Israel all the way.
How much coverage is this visit by Prime Minister Netanyahu getting in the United States? I mean, do you think people in the U.S., Angie, are following developments closely? Do people take a close interest, do you think, there in what's happening in Gaza?
Absolutely. There is a very, very large Jewish population here in the U.S., probably one of the largest diasporas outside of Israel itself. So many, many people are following the story. It's been a great state visit. Certainly the red carpets have rolled out, and a lot of dignitaries as well as congressional members have come to meet with Netanyahu at the White House. He's being celebrated here. A lot of it is, pageantry to show the world that the U.S. stands with Israel. And again, President Trump wants to push for the ceasefire deal. Right now, the ball is in Hamas's court.
Okay, let's move on to another topic, the war in Ukraine. President Trump has expressed some disappointment in his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. President Putin hasn't actually responded in words, but experts say he often responds through actions. And shortly after President Trump's remarks, Russia launched a massive drone attack on Ukraine. I mean, Angie, what a change from February, when there was that infamous meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky in the Oval Office. And now it looks like President Trump is getting on much better with President Zelensky and not quite so well with President Putin. I mean, he really seems to be losing patience, doesn't he?
Yes, and I think that's a good reading of it. President Trump is very frustrated with Russian President Putin. He realizes now, after many, many months of trying to do diplomacy, that Putin is responding with well, just being defensive and showing dominance. The actions do not match the words coming out of Putin's mouth. I think President Trump has finally come to that realization that Putin's not going to stop. He has sent Secretary of State Marco Rubio to Malaysia to speak with the foreign minister of Russia, Lavrov, and they seem to be having some sort of open line and productive talks. But again, it's all talk. We've been reporting on this story for many years now, and a lot of the words that come out do not match the actions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering how united the GOP is on this particular issue, because in the past, Republicans have urged, you know, a winding down of this conflict, some sort of a resolution, whatever it may be. And basically for that to happen, I mean, President Trump's got two options, hasn't he? Either he cuts Ukraine loose and walks away, or he sends in Patriot air defense missiles, cranks up the sanctions and doubles down. What's looking like a more likely scenario at the moment?
Right. I think for the past 4 or 5 months, you've seen President Trump try to do the art of the deal with Putin and Zelensky, and it's just not working. He is down to his last straw here. He has even promised to, as of yesterday, send more weaponry, more U.S. weaponry to Ukraine. And how did Putin respond to that? Well, he flew over 700 drones last night to kind of a northern western part of Ukraine to bomb where they're going to be receiving it near the borderline of Poland. So this is the response, right? This is what is happening. And next, because right now the test is on Trump. Putin is trying to see whether or not Trump is going to respond to the drone strikes, what he's going to do. He also understands that President Trump does not want to send U.S. troops to fight this war. It's highly unpopular here in the U.S. Most Republicans and Democrats don't want to see that. This is not our fight. But at the same time, President Trump knows he has to do something about what's been going on because too many civilians are getting killed from both sides. And so I think last week we had heard that President Trump was going to loan some of our Air Force there, maybe to do something similar to what had happened in Iran, where we're doing flyovers, watching the skies, but no boots on the ground.
Yeah, let's move on because President Trump's tariffs are still rolling. The US president isn't backing down, imposing a 30% tariff on imports from 7 more countries, amongst them Iraq, Moldova, and the Philippines. Brazil also in the president's line of target. I mean, is there a feeling there in the US and amongst President Trump's support base that he's right to pursue this line of action?
Well, I mean, the tariffs are something that has been a cornerstone of Trump's second administration. And finally, as of July 9th, that was the deadline. So those were the deals that he was able to make during that deadline. Clearly, you know, it's been reported that that deadline has been extended to August. These were all the deals that came through first. It's going to be a slow process, Tom. I don't think this is going to be, I think this is like watching paint dry. Nobody finds tariff talks very, very exciting. But what we can say is because the big, beautiful bill is now law, and that's given lots of tax incentives and tax cuts to Americans, well, we have to make up that tax loss, monetary loss to the federal government somewhere. And I think President Trump wants to fill it with the overseas tariffs that we're implying onto many, many countries. The first ones to come are going to receive the best deals. President Trump's team has already said that. So these are the best deals that we're going to get. So South Korea, Japan, and others, they're seeing some of that come through. And we're going to resume trade. This is going to help everyone. This is going to help our supply chains. This is going to help all the shipping containers that are sitting around in the Pacific Ocean right now, not knowing if they should dock or not because of the tariffs. These are I think this is very fast progress. Remember, in the past, when we were doing trade deals and tariff talks, it would take 2 to 3 years. So this is super speed.
Okay, I mean, with regards to the US economy, largely speaking, I don't know what impact these tariffs are having on the US economy. The latest figures that we're looking at, I mean, the labor market looks all right. The US economy, the latest indicators seem to be pretty strong. I mean, is that how it feels? Does it feel like 6 months since President Trump returned to the White House, like the economy has taken a significant turn for perhaps the better? How does it feel?
It feels amazing, actually. You see more and more people working and going back to the office. There are people spending. In fact, we have an egg index here because the egg prices were through the roof during the Biden administration. They've actually gone down tremendously. Our gas prices are back to 2017 levels. We're in good shape right now. We're feeling pretty good. Again, the runway I thought was going to be quite short with these tariff talks because I know Wall Street was panicking when President Trump rolled out his tariff deals early in April, I believe, of this year. But now it seems like calmer waters. We are very, very hopeful that we're going to have a great, successful next 4 years because President Trump is literally resetting the world economy by putting America first and making sure that we get the greatest deal out of this. He's the ultimate deal maker.
Okay, and the last story, Angie, that we've picked out for this week, the US President Donald Trump has been meeting with the president of Liberia, President Joseph Boakai, and he complimented the visiting president for his English. Now, critics have questioned whether President Trump was aware of the fact that English is, in fact, the official language of Liberia. Let's take a listen.
I want to thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. And such good English, such beautiful. Where did you learn to speak so beautifully? Where were you educated? Where?
Yes, sir.
In Liberia.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's very interesting. It's beautiful English.
Sure.
I have people at this table can't speak nearly as well.
Okay, so President Trump heaping praise there on the visiting president of Liberia who grew up speaking English. I mean, how's this gone down in the US, Angie?
Certainly, he's allowed a couple of gaffes. You know, President Biden certainly had plenty. No, this was very cringy. I could not watch this video, and I had to for your show, but I did not enjoy seeing that. I mean, he should have been briefed better by his staff that this country is, you know, has very close ties with the U.S. and English is its official language. But I'm going to give him a pass on this. He's allowed to have a few. This was a minor one, but ultimately, President Trump had invited 5 African nations to the White House to talk about trade and investments. This was to signal to President Xi of China that, you know, you don't own Africa, which is where China has been, you know, gaining a lot of grounds, especially in the minerals and oil deposit areas, and also in some of the engineering projects there. President Trump also wants to have those deals, and he wants to show China that we can get in there too. So I think that's what this was intended to be. Unfortunately, the media focused on, well, that President Trump didn't know that this country spoke English. So this is, you know, unfortunate, but I'm hoping that they get over it, and that we have amazing trade deals.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a trip to Africa could be in the offing for President Trump to help him brush up on his geography and also remind him which countries speak which languages on the continent. It is confusing, though. There were French-speaking African leaders there, English-speaking African leaders there at the same table in Washington. All right, Angie Wong, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate you joining us for this week's edition of A Look Back at the Big Stories in the United States. Well, that's all we have time for on today's edition of Global News Today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us tomorrow for a special edition. We take a look back at some of the best interviews of the week. Until then, bye-bye.